The first clash of the two armies was inconclusive. The king's skirmish line, consisting of light infantry accompanied by archers, advanced on Morga's left flank in a probing movement. The lightly armed skirmishers scampered back to the safety of their own lines, ahead of the slow treading Wargles. Then, as a company of heavy cavalry trotted forward towards the Wargles battalions' left flank, the Wargles reformed from their column of fours, marching order into a slower moving defensive square and widening to their own lines, withdrew to their own lines. For the next few hours that remained the pattern of the battle. Small forces would probe the other side's defenses, larger forces would offer to counter, and the first attack would melt away. Harold, Fergus, and Tyler sat their horses beside the king, on a small knoll in the centre of the royal army. Battlemaster David was with a small group of knights, making one of the many forays towards the royal army. All this toing and froing is getting me down, Harold said sourly. The king smiled at him. He had one of the most important attributes of a good commander, almost unlimited patience. Morgoth is waiting, he said simply, waiting for horse army to show itself in our rear. Then he'll attack, have no doubt. Let's just get on with it ourselves, growled Fergus, but Duncan shook his head, pointing to the ground immediately to the front of Morgoth's position. The land there is soft and boggy, he said. It would reduce the effectiveness of our best weapons, our cavalry. We'll wait till Morgoth comes to us, then we can fight him on ground that's more to our liking. There was an urgent clatter of hoofs from the rear, and the royal party turned to watch a courier spurring his horse up the last slope to the knoll where they waited. He halted on his reins. He hauled on his reins, looked around until he saw the king's blond head, then dug in his spurs again, eventually bringing his horse to a sliding stop beside them. His green surcoat, light mail armor, and thin-bladed sword showed him to be a scout. Your Majesty, he said breathlessly, a report from Sir Vincent. Vincent was the leader of the Messenger Corps, a group of soldiers who acted as the knight's eyes and ears during a battle, carrying reports and orders to all parts of the battlefield. Duncan nodded acknowledgement, indicating that the man should go ahead and give his message. The rider swallowed several times and looked anxiously at the king and his three barons. All at once Harold knew this was not going to be good news. Sir, said the scout hesitantly, Sir Vincent's respect, sir, and there appears to be Scandinavians behind us. There were startled exclamations from several of the joint officers surrounding the command group. Fergus swung on them, his bows drawn together his brows drawn together in a frown. Be quiet, he stormed, and in an instant the noise dropped away. The aides looked shamefaced at their lack of discipline. Exactly where are these Canadians, and how many are there? Duncan asked the scouts calmly. His unruffled manner seemed to communicate itself to the messenger. This time he answered with a lot more confidence. The first group are visible on the low ridge of the northwest, Your Majesty. As yet we can see only 100 or so. Sir Vincent suggests that the best position for you to view the situation would be from the small hill to our left rear. The king nodded and turned to one of the younger officers. Ranald, perhaps you might ride and advise Sir David of this new development. Tell him we are shifting the command post to the hill, Sir Vincent suggested. Yes, my lord, replied the young knight. He wheeled his horse and set off at a gallop. The king then turned to his companions. Gentlemen, let's see about these Canadians, shall we? Straining his eyes, Baron Arrow peered at the small group of men on the hill behind them. Even at this distance, it was possible to make out the horned helmets and the huge circular shields that the sea raiders carried. A small group had even advanced down the near side of the hill, and they were easier to make out. Just as obvious was their choice of the typical Canadian arrowhead formation as they advanced. He estimated that several hundred of the enemies were now in sight, with who knew how many more hidden on the other side of the hills. He felt a great weight of sadness upon his shoulders. The fact that the Canadians were there meant only the one thing: Holt had failed. And knowing Holt as he did, he knew that probably meant that the grizzled ranger had died in the attempt. He knew Holt would never have surrendered, not when the need to stop the Canadians breaking through to the army's rear was so vital. Duncan voiced the thoughts of all of them. There's Canadians, all right. He glanced around the hilltop. We're going to have to fight a defensive battle, my lord, he continued. I suggest we begin to pull our men into a circle around this hill. It's a good spot, as good as a spot as any to be fighting on both sides. They all knew it was only a matter of time now before Morgoth advanced to crush them between the two jaws of the trap he had set. Rider coming, called one of the aides. Pointing, they all turned to face the way he indicated. From a copse of trees at the right-hand end of the ridge, a lone rider burst into sight. Svingle of the Canadians gave chase, hurling spears and clubs after him, but he was stretched low over his horse's neck, his grey-green cloak streaming behind him in his wind, and he soon outdistanced the pursuit. That's Gillen, Baron Arrow muttered, recognizing the bay horse as he rode. He looked in vain a second behind Gillen, hoping against hope that Holt might have somehow survived, but it was not to be. His shoulders sagged a little as he realized that Gillen appeared to be the only surviving of the force that had marched off so boldly into the thorn tree forest. Gillen had hit the flat land and was still riding full pelt towards them. He saw the royal standards flying on the knoll and swerved blazed towards them. In a few minutes he drew rein beside them, covered in dust, one sleeve of his tunic ripped and a rough, blood-stained bandage around his head. Sir, he said breathlessly, forgetting the niceties of addressing royalty. Holt says, can you? He got no further, as at least 4 people interrupted him. Baron Fergus' voice, however, was the loudest. Holt, he's alive! Gillen grinned in reply. Oh yes, sir, alive and kicking, but the Canadians, King Duncan began, indicating the lines of them on the ridge. Gillen grinned widened even further. Beaten, sir. We caught them totally by surprise and cut them all to pieces. Those men there are our archers, wearing helmets and shields taken from the enemy. It was Holt's idea. To what purpose? Arrow asked crisply, and Gillen turned to face him with an apologetic nod of his head to the king. To deceive Morgoth, my lord, he replied. He's expecting to see Canadians attack you from the rear, and now he will. That's why they even made a pretense of trying to stop me just now. Our own cavalry is just beyond the brow of the ridge. Holt proposed that he should advance with the archers, forcing you to turn and face the rear. Then, with any luck, as Morgoth attack with his wargals, both the archers and your main army should open a path through the center, allowing the hidden cavalry to come through and hit Morgoth when he's in the open. By God, it's a great idea, said Duncan enthusiastically. Odds are that we'll stir up so much dust and confusion that he won't see Holt's cavalry until it's right on top of him. Then, my lord, we can deploy the heavy cavalry from either wing to the wargals in the flanks. The new speaker was Sir David. He had arrived unnoticed as Gillen was explaining Holt's plan. King Duncan hesitated for a second or two, tugging at his short beard. Then he nodded decisively. "We'll do it," he said. "Gentlemen, you'd better get to your commands straight away. Fergus, Arrow, take a section of the heavy cavalry, each to the left and right wings, and stand ready. Tyler, command the infantry in the center. Make sure they know this is a fake attack, and order them to shout and bear their swords on their shields as the Scandinavians approach, or make it sound like a battle as well as look like one. Have them ready to split to the sides as three horn blasts. 3-horn blasts, eh, my lord," said Tyler. He dug his spurs into his battle horse, sighed, and galloped away. 2. Take command of the infantry. Duncan looked to his remaining commanders. "Get to it, my lord. We don't have much time." From behind, one of his aides called out, "Sir, the Canadians are moving downwind." A second or so later, another man echoed the cry, and the wargers were beginning to move forward. Duncan smiled grimly at his commanders. "I think it's time we gave Morgoth a little surprise," he said. Okay, thank you for listening to me read chapter 31. If you'd like to listen to me read chapter 32, then please stay posted and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.